千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Daodejing by Lao Tzu. Previously, we went through and looked at the structure of chapter 42. So as usual, this was the first thing that we did. And the sectional analysis looked like this. As usual, it is mostly based on recurrence of Chinese characters that you can see on the left-hand side. And what I also pointed out was that in some cases, characters that repeated themselves did not occur in the same position. In the first section, we have 万物, myriad things being repeated from the end of line 4 to the beginning of line 5. And that indicates that it's a continuation of the thought that started as far back as the very beginning, line 1, Tao produces 1. And in a similar way, toward the bottom, we see a whole bunch of repeating characters that appear in different positions. So last time, we got as far as line 4. So we talked about this very interesting progression from the Tao to the 1, to the 2, to the 3, to the myriad things. So before we got into that progression, we talked about the number 42 because this is chapter 42. What is the significance of that? Well, it's kind of interesting actually because the number 42 in pop culture is coincidentally the answer to the ultimate question. It's the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything. And what I talked about last time was that if you did do a search in Google, even right now, Google is going to answer your question by telling you that the answer is 42. Well, where did that come from? Well, it came from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a comedic, very funny science fiction series of books by author Douglas Adams. It started out as a radio play on BBC. It was turned into a television show, also on BBC. And then the images that you see in the slide are from the movie production. And as I talked about before, this is where aliens, which in the movie were depicted by a couple of adorable little girls, asked this very powerful computer called Deep Thought. And when they asked about the ultimate answer, the computer came back with 42. And this, of course, took everyone by surprise. Now, one thing that I do want to talk a little bit more about was why the author, Douglas Adams, chose 42 as the answer to the ultimate question. So the very first incarnation of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when it was still a radio show, and we're talking 30 years ago now, this was something that I got into early on. And so I also eagerly listened to the interview that the author gave when the question came up. So when the interviewer asked, so why 42? His answer was interesting. He said that 42 was the most boring number that he could come up with, that it wasn't anything special, that it wasn't a prime number, it had no cultural significance, like the number 13, for bad luck, or 7 for good fortune. It was just 42. There's nothing special you could say about it. So he used that for a couple of reasons. Reason number one was that he wanted to convey humor. He wanted to say that, yeah, that's right. You've always suspected that life doesn't make any sense, that life is absurd. So look at this, the ultimate question and the ultimate answer are actually reflecting that lack of sense that the world makes. This boring answer turns out to be the answer to the ultimate question: how absurd is that? The other reason for him to use the number 42 was because it was a way for him to get to what he really wanted to say. He didn't want to talk about just the ultimate answer. He wanted to talk about the ultimate question. Or more precisely, he wanted to talk about the quest for the ultimate question. What exactly is the ultimate question to life, the universe, and everything? So as a way to get there, he had this computer, this fictional computer, Deep Thought, explain to the aliens that Deep Thought itself was not qualified to compute the ultimate question to the ultimate answer. But he could design, Deep Thought could design the computer that would provide the answer. This computer was so advanced that organic life itself shall be part of its operational matrix. And Deep Thought gave this computer a name, Earth. So after 7 million years of construction, Earth was created as an advanced computer that is running a program along with all the living things on it to explore and identify the ultimate question. So this is what Douglas Adams wanted to say. Look at this amazing, beautiful world of ours. We're all part of it. You and I are part of this ultimate quest, the quest to find the ultimate question. See, this is actually a statement from Douglas Adams about the life that you and I live in this world. Aren't we all in the same quest together? In that sense, it is really very Tao-like. Understanding what he was trying to get at gives us all the more reasons to cherish the Earth, this incredible computer that we're deeply embedded as part of it. And that deep embedding is a major subject that we're going to be going into in detail today. But first, we looked into the progression from the 1 to the 2 to the 3 to the myriad things, which is in the first few lines. And we were able to illustrate by comparing and contrasting with different schools of thought. So for instance, we looked at the slide last time. So then we have, right in the middle, we have the scientific thought. To the left, we have the Western thought. And when I say Western thought, I realize that this is a very big brush. And I was just identifying the Judeo-Christian tradition, even though there's so much diversity in Western thought. Same with Eastern thought. A lot of diversity there, and I'm just using the Tao as a way to represent that. So the Eastern thought has the Tao being the source of everything. In Western thought, we have God being the ultimate, eternal, causeless cause. So there's your comparison and contrast right there. What about scientific thought? It is unknown, a mystery, or nothing, or the multiverse. So the question is far from settled. That's sort of the nature of science. As it is right now, to the best of our knowledge today, the best and most advanced scientific thinking is closer to the original conception of the Tao from the ancient Chinese sages thousands of years ago. Then, what followed in this particular chapter, chapter 42, was that the Tao gave rise to existence, or reality, or the universe itself. The word universe, as I pointed out, literally means one verse or one song. In scientific thought, it is quantum fluctuation that gives rise to the Big Bang some 14 billion years ago. And in Western thought, in the Bible, in the beginning was the Word. So that's the transition from the emptiness to somethingness. And then finally, we talked about how eventually oneness gave rise to everything through complementary duality, and all the enumeration of the Bagua, which we will talk about. And complementary duality can mean heaven and earth, light and darkness, etc. It finds correspondence in Western thought because in Genesis, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, that's a complementary duality there. God divided the light from the darkness. So light and darkness will be another complementary duality. So interesting correspondence. What about scientific thought? Well, in the very middle of this slide, you'll see that I wrote the emergence of all the positive energy, which manifests as matter, and equal negative energy manifesting as gravity. So this comes from a hypothesis known as the zero energy universe. And for those of you who are scientifically minded, it is very easy to look it up on the internet, various articles about the zero energy hypothesis. What it says is that the total amount of energy in the universe is zero, just like the Tao is zero. There's an interesting correspondence there. And then it also goes on to talk about how in the zero energy universe, you can have the total energy being zero as long as you have a positive amount of energy that is canceled out by the negative amount of energy. So it could be, if you think about 1 million added to negative 1 million will equal out to exactly zero. That's the idea. So tremendous amount of positive energy becoming matter from Einstein's famous equation, then the negative energy manifesting as gravity throughout the universe. So there you can have a complementary duality as well, positive and negative. And we also took a deeper look, not just cosmology now, but Genesis, that is the beginning of life. So the statements that we find in chapter 42, from the 0 to the 1, something out of nothing. In the Bible, it is, of course, God creating Adam. And that's the famous painting that I have over here, classical paintings for the first 3 steps. As you can see, God creating Adam. Then from 1 to 2, which in the Bible would be God taking a rib from Adam and creating Eve. And there is also legend about Lilith, that was the first wife of Adam. But that's an added complication. It's sort of a detour, so let's not get into that right now. From 2 to 3, which in the Tao is the animation, it's the movement, it's the dynamism, it's transformation. In the Bible, that factor, the factor of dynamism, of change, of transformation, is represented by the apple. Apple represents knowledge. Knowledge changes and transforms. It is inevitable, and you cannot go back to the way you used to be. Nothing can ever be the same again. Then, in the Daodejing, it says, from the three to myriad things, and for the Bible, that would be the fall from the Garden of Eden, where humanity, beginning with Adam and Eve, went forth, and humanity was fruitful, humanity multiplied, which leads to the world as we have it today, the diversity of mankind. So it's kind of interesting that even when you take these great traditions, you can find correspondence between them. You can find correspondence between the lines in chapter 42 and key events from Genesis, from the Bible. So then this set us up to continue on to talk about the rest of the new section, the first section. So we went through lines 1 to 4, and now we're ready to talk about line 5 and line 6. And then what I'll do is that I'll introduce everyone to this same concept, the 1 to the 2 to the 3 to the myriad things, but expressed differently in Chinese culture. So now, before we do that, let's talk about yin and yang. So in this line, line 5, the translation is myriad things backed by yin and embracing yang. So I'd like to explain that real quickly, just to get us started, starting with backed by yin. What is that? What does that mean? So to be backed by yin means that living things are sourced in yin, or that yin, female energy, the female principle, is the source of life. So yin serves as the source, the backing, or the foundation, or the basis for life. So in other words, mother giving birth to infants, that is what we understand from the human perspective. So when we extend out from human beings to all living things out in nature, well, we can say, yeah, we can generalize and say that it's true. The life in all living things has a foundation in the yin principle, that it is sourced in the yin principle, it's backed by yin, and that's the way that Lao Tzu expressed it. So what about the other part? What about embracing yang? Here we go. In Mandarin, Bao Yang. What does that mean? To embrace the yang is to be active. Embracing the yang principle is embracing the active, dynamic, action-oriented principle. So this is about being active, to do all the things in the normal course of living a normal life. So embracing yang, being active, is what it means. All living things exhibit this, but let's take a look at the human example first. We know human baby learns to walk ASAP and will not stop until walking is mastered. So we all see this. It's all part of raising a baby, that the baby learns to walk. So once again, we can extend this out to be more general, to apply to all living things. And we definitely see that, yes, it is true, all living creatures are similar in that they become active as soon as they are strong enough to be active. So the idea is to observe in the human world and then expand the concept to include all living things. So then let's take a look at the entire line. Myriad things backed by yin and embracing yang. When we talked about Adam and Eve from the Bible, we can look at them. Now we know that it's not exactly, biology isn't exactly as it was depicted in the Bible, in the Genesis, the Garden of Eden, etc. But we can use Adam and Eve as symbols, that they can be symbolic of human procreation. So reproduction, reproductive activities, everyone who has ever lived comes from the interaction of male and female energies. And this is just a way to say that, yes, mom and dad had to work together to create a baby. Of course, that is something that we all understand. Now, this can be generalized and expanded out to cover much more generally, to say that we can extrapolate it, so it's more general, and then we can follow the ancient sages when they said that, well, the myriad living things, you know, not just humans, but everything out in nature, they all came from this interplay of yin and yang energies. Now, for human beings, that interplay would be like a dance between men and women, males and females. The courtship, the dating, the relationships, love, marriage, all of that. That's all ritualized and becoming something that we're all very accustomed to in the human world. So then, what this says, when we generalize it, is that the interplay of male and female energies, yin and yang energies, must be because from the 1 to the 2 to the 3, and the 3 to the myriad things, that whole process is the Tao of Universal Creation, and it must be deeply embedded in all living things. And that is why we have complementary dualities within us, that in every person, there's yin and there's yang. So I call it sort of like a universal DNA or a natural blueprint. So hang on to this idea for a moment, that yin and yang isn't just an abstract symbol, but living, breathing principles within you and me. And by the way, we all know that there's asexual reproduction in nature as well. There are living cells that divide, and that's how the multiplication, that's how the multiplying of virus, bacteria, etc., will occur naturally. So there, the duality would not necessarily be male and female because it's asexual reproduction. It would then take the form of life and death, where life itself would take the position of the yang principle, while death will be the yin principle. So it's even more elementary when you look at it that way. But let's stick to the higher forms of life beyond virus and bacteria and germs and cells and whatnot, and stick to the living things. Specifically, let's stick to human beings for the moment. After all, the reason why we're studying the Tao is because we want to better our lives. So we have to, at some point, we always have to return to the human perspective. And we need to be asking the question, how can this help me live my life? So line 6 says, the myriad things achieve harmony by integrating their energy, the energies of yin and yang. So, conclusion, not only do we have the yin and yang within us, but complementary dualities manifest in everything we do. So it's in our actions, it's in what we say to people, what we talk about, it's in the way that we interact, we deal with one another, deal with situations and problems. It applies in every situation. So we have to work with yin and yang, is basically what we're saying here. So the translation says achieve harmony by integrating basically yin and yang. So let's talk about that. First, let's talk about the nature of yin and yang. Recall to mind the yin and yang symbol. See what it looks like in your mind. The graceful curve between the two halves, the black and white parts, the yin within yang, the yang within yin, you all know what it looks like. So one thing that it teaches when we look at yin within yang and yang within yin is that it is saying nothing is ever 100% pure, which applies to human beings, means that you have both yin and yang within. You can adjust them. You can maximize or minimize, increase or decrease one or the other, hopefully in an attempt to attain some kind of balance. But you can never completely get rid of yin or get rid of yang. A little bit of it will always remain, no matter how you minimize. So that's one thing that we notice about the yin and yang. And as we are talking about increasing and decreasing the proportion of one versus the other, we know that too much of either yin or yang will be a bad thing. It will lead to negative consequences. Later on in this chapter, we have an example of too much yang energy in someone who's prone to being violent. So we'll get to that in a moment. Now, we want to talk about the right mixture between yin and yang. When they are in the proper balance, which may not be 50-50, the proper balance may be 40-60, 30-70. It depends on the situation. There's no magic formula that applies for every situation. It just depends on all the factors involved to get the right amount. But the right mixture of the two can be very positive. When yin and yang are in balance, there's harmony, and harmonious balance can show up in your life as better health, greater power, authentic personal power, greater success, and so on. Now, at the end of line 6, which is the end of the first section, we're getting from the progression 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to myriad things, to an emphasis that basically says, well, the 2 is already in you, complementary dualities, and you have to integrate yin and yang. You have to integrate the 2. So before we get into section 2, I want to, at the end of section 1, I want to present to everyone another way to express that the first 4 lines, 0 to 1, from the Tao to the 1, from the 1 to the 2, 2 to the 3, 3 to the myriad things. Those 4 lines are expressed differently. And I want to make sure you see this other expression as well. It's what I call the Tao of creation. There are 4 lines presented in blue. And the first line is, as you see here, 无极生太极. So hang there for just a moment. I'm going to explain exactly what it means. First, I want to isolate the first 2 characters, 无极, and then talk about what they are. So here's the literal meaning. The first character means to not have, to be without. And then the second character, ji, means boundary or extent. So whatever is without boundary is without limit. So 无极 really means the infinite, the boundless, the unlimited, the limitless. So there's a whole bunch of different expressions to talk about 无极. And 无极, if you want to represent it pictorially, you would basically use a blank sheet of paper. That's it. It's the state of nothingness. And yet, a blank sheet of paper is a blank canvas. It's an invitation to exercise your creativity. You can write things on a blank sheet of paper. You can draw, you can paint. So the blank sheet of paper can become beauty, can become design. It can become something wonderful. And that is the essence of 无极. Then, that's the first two characters. The middle character, shen, means to produce, to give birth to beget, to give rise to. And then taiji, this is the other important term. So let me isolate that. Taiji, what does that mean? Well, we figured out that ji, the second character, means boundary or extent. What about tai? That character means ultimate. So taiji together, the first two characters mean the ultimate extent, pushing the edge of the envelope, right at the boundary. This can be represented as a circle. And here's something that I want everyone to know. The Tai Chi that you have seen perhaps people do in a park, slow movements, graceful movements, good exercise, can also de-stress. Tai Chi is actually the older romanization of Tai Chi. It always was supposed to be pronounced Tai Chi, but nobody knew that CHI, Qi, was supposed to be pronounced that way. So everybody says Tai Chi, but it's actually Tai Chi. So it's well known in the West, and it's actually named after this term. The full name for the exercise/martial art is Tai Chi Quan. And I know that many of you have tried it or are still actively practicing it. So when we want to represent 无极生太极, the state of the infinite giving rise to the ultimate, we would use something like this, where there's only blankness at the top half of this pictorial diagram, going into a circle representing Taiji. And here's the translation for that. 无极 gives rise to Taiji. And that's because 无极 and Taiji have become jargon, specialized terms that oftentimes people who study Tai Chi will get into and understand, become familiar with these two terms. So 无极 gives rise to Taiji. Now I mentioned that there are 4 lines in this alternative expression of the Tao of creation. So what about the other 3 lines? What I can provide 2 additional lines. I can highlight, I can explain 2 additional lines. First of all, 太极生两仪. You can see the 太极 at the end of line 1 becomes the beginning of line 2. And then there's the same character, giving rise to, giving birth to, produces, and then we have a new term, 两仪, at the end of line 2. So 两仪, I have singled out for explanation. These are the 2 aspects, the so-called 2 aspects. What the 2 aspects are, you already know about. It's the Yin and Yang symbol that we've been referring to. So synonymous with the yin and yang. Therefore, we can translate the second line as Taiji gives rise to the two aspects. Simple, right? So let's explore line 3. So again, we have the two aspects at the end of line 2 going into the beginning of line 3. So 两仪生四象. Okay, well, what is that? A new term. Let's take a look. We can see, first of all, that when we depict Taiji Shen Liang Yi, we have circle as a symbol for Taiji, the ultimate, going into the Yin and Yang symbol, which Liang Yi, synonymous with the Yin and Yang. And now, let's take a look at Si Xiang. So, what is it? The 4 images. So literally, the first character means 4, the second character means image or reflection. It's the image of the great Tao or reflection of the great Tao. The 4 images can represent a lot of different things. It can, for instance, represent the 4 seasons, 4 compass directions, north, south, east, and west, etc. However, even though it's something that we see in real life, it's actually not depicted graphically. There's no specific depiction of that. If you had to depict it graphically, I would suggest that the compass with the 4 cardinal directions will do nicely. So we have now looked at the Mandarin characters in line 3 were ready for the translation. The 2 aspects give rise to the 4 images. So then we just have one more line to talk about. So let's do that. Here's the last line. 四象生八卦. So once again, the end of line 3 becomes the beginning of line 4. And then we have Shen, the same character for producing, giving rise to. And then we have Bagua. So what is that? So literally what it means, the first character is 8, and the second character means trigrams. Now, Gua, the second character, in this case, is translated as trigrams, but the same character appears in reference to I Jing, the Book of Changes, and there it's translated differently. Here it is trigrams because you're going to see that it's composed of 3 lines, broken lines and complete lines. In the I Jing context, it is no longer 8, it's 64, and it's translated as hexagram because in I Jing it is composed of 6 lines, some all the way through, some broken in the middle. So then the 4 images give rise to Bagua. And here's what Bagua looks like. Looks like the octagonal shape, 8 sides, each one with a different combination of unbroken lines and lines broken in the middle. That's Bagua. So there are 8 of them, which is why it's the 8 trigrams. So with that, we have all 4 lines, which is a different way to express the Tao of creation. So think about the difference for just a moment. The first line is a close correspondence to the Tao produces the one. Wuji gives rise to Taiji. And then the second line matches line 2 in chapter 42. Taiji gives rise to the 2 aspects. That's the one producing the 2. Then we begin to vary. In the Daodejing, it says the 2 produce 3. And that's the factor of dynamism or action or movement or change or transformation. Here, though, in this expression, it's talking about two aspects giving rise to the four images, from the two to the four, rather than the third factor of dynamism, which in this expression is baked in to the second line. So remember, the second line, the two aspects, that is already the yin and yang. In the Daodejing expression, the second line is about the duality, two things. And then the third line, the third factor, is when they become the interacting yin and yang. So that's the difference. And then the fourth line, in this case, involves the Bagua, the 8 trigrams. But in the Daodejing, it's about how the interactions, the third factor, the dynamism, giving rise to the myriad things. So again, a little bit different. First two lines, mostly the same. The last two lines, mostly different. So when we put it together, here's what we have. And I've got this alternative English expression of the same concept. Wuji gives rise to Taiji. The oneness of the Tao emerges from limitless infinity. So I am swapping the order to form a sensible English sentence. Limitless infinity will be Wuji. The oneness of the Tao will be Taiji. So they're reversed in this English formulation. Then Taiji gives rise to the two aspects. Again, I flip them around. The complementary duality emerges from the ultimate oneness. So the ultimate oneness is Taiji. Complementary duality will be the Yin and Yang symbol. And then the two aspects give rise to the four images. I flip them around. The four images of the Tao emerge from the complementary duality. And lastly, the four images give rise to Bagua. I say the 8 trigrams emerge from the four images. So these are just different ways to say the same thing. Now, I want to also put in the note here that some people will even add a fifth line, like Bagua Yan Wan Wu, which can be translated as Bagua manifest as the myriad things. So this would match the fourth line in Daodejing chapter 42. And if I were to flip it around in the way that I have done here with the alternative English expression, I would say the myriad things manifest from the 8 trigrams. So now, and Wan Wu, of course, when we talk about the myriad things, I want to just briefly mention that Wan Wu means 10,000 things, literally. It can refer to all living things or just everything. So with the alternative explanation, with the alternative expressions that you see here, we can now conclude the presentation on the first section with the following. So line 1, 2, 3, and 4, these are the first 4 lines of the first section of 42. 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to myriad things. And I want to reiterate some of the symbology that you saw, and I want to relate it to the world. 0 to the 1, if you look at just the earth, 0 to the 1 in the context of life on this planet would be inorganic molecules to organic, self-replicating molecules able to reproduce, proliferate. So this is called abiogenesis. It's the process of going from non-life to life. And this took place roughly 4 billion years ago. Then I want to use the same graphical representation that you saw before, from the nothingness of the blank page to the something, which is represented by Tai Chi. And then for the second line, from the 1 to the 2, well, unity to duality, differentiation of genders, which occurred about 1.2 billion years ago on this planet. So that would be represented this way. Now, as I mentioned, in 42, in the second line, it looks like it might be the Yin and Yang symbol, but not yet. Right here in line 2, it's really just talking about the two halves, the differentiation, that's it. Then we add the dynamism. We add the movements, the change, the motion. So biological reproduction, driving evolutionary changes, duality to dynamism. Now we have the Yin and Yang symbol, as you can see. So this is the Daodejing way of expressing all of that. And lastly, number 4, dynamism to biosphere. When I say biosphere, I mean just, on this planet, everything on the surface of this planet, even extending below the surface, that sustains life. That's the biosphere. All the different forms of life we see out in nature, and a lot more that we don't see. In symbology, this would be the Yin and Yang symbol, driving toward everything, the Bagua, the myriad things. So, as per plan, we're gonna start getting into the second section of this chapter, starting with line 7. Line 7 says what the people dislike. And here, I want to make a comment about the difference between most people and the people who cultivate the Tao. So first, you and I can look around. We can observe the world. We can easily see what people like and dislike, and we see the same likes and dislikes in ourselves. After all, we are all mired in the material world. Most of us chase after material things at one time or another. Not all of us, definitely, but a lot of us. As to what people dislike, well, I think that the typical person, as I have observed, wants to be seen in a positive light. That is to say, most people are pretty attached to the perception of others, the good opinion of others. Most people want to be widely known as good, as deserving of all the good things in life. And most people, by extension, want to avoid the opposite. That is, they want to avoid being social outcast, being seen as the bad guy, being seen as disgraceful. So the point that Lao Tzu wanted to make is that these are all qualities that people dislike, and yet these are the very qualities that the rulers apply to themselves in their self-deprecating self-description. This was true at the time of Lao Tzu, and also at the time before, for thousands of years before the time of Lao Tzu. This was a common practice for the rulers. So what are the terms exactly? They will be the next line: alone, bereft, and unworthy. So let's just break them down one by one. The first term, gu, this is still used in modern Mandarin as an expression of being lonely or being alone. But rulers no longer refer to themselves with gu. Back then, they did, to convey the fact that it's lonely at the top. People can have friends, but not the ruler. For the ruler, from the ruler's perspective, if you think about how people may want to be friends with you because you have the power to rule everybody, they may be more interested in the power than they are in you. So does the ruler truly have friends? It's hard to say. So it's lonely at the top. Second character, Gua. This character is still commonly used in modern Mandarin when you talk about a widow. A widow is someone who's bereft of the spouse. And here, the meaning by itself is just to be bereft, to be without, to be lacking. Specifically, rulers use that term to say that they are bereft or without or lacking in virtues. So the idea is that out of humility, the ruler assumes there must be some sort of room for improvement, as opposed to, I am already perfect. I don't need to do anything. After all, I am the king or the emperor. Why should I change? So in the days of Lao Tzu, the idea is that when you have the high position of ruling over people, you must work extra hard at discovering in yourself the places where you can improve. And then, 不古. The last expression here, no longer used in modern Mandarin. It's unworthy because it expresses the concept that only through an accident of birth did the ruler end up in that position. Absolute power over the subjects of a kingdom. Not exactly something that was earned. Now, exceptions to that would be a warlord who conquers and then ascends to rule. In that case, it was something that was earned with a lot of blood and sweat and probably hardship. But in the case of most of the rulers, they inherited the position, and therefore it was just due to birth and nothing else. Therefore, unworthy. So these were the terms that were used back in the days of Lao Tzu 2,500 years ago. It was customary for rulers to refer to themselves with these lowly terms. And the idea was to express humility. Of course, as a human custom, this would get twisted, this will be distorted. Over time, this was often forgotten. Rulers ignorant of the Tao might use these terms to refer to themselves just because that's the way it's always been done, but without real understanding, or that is to say, without real humility. And after that, after the time of Lao Tzu, the only term to survive was related to the middle one, Gua, and it was there was another character added to it, Gua Ren. Ren just means person. So Gua Ren would be the bereft person. So after the Tang Dynasty, rulers often used Gua Ren. The other two terms, Gu, Bu Gu, they did not survive the ages. So this one survived in that form. And then there was also another term for royalty, for the ruler, the emperor, to refer to himself, and that was Zhen. This term does not have the self-deprecating emphasis on humility. So that is a major difference. But regardless of historical practice, I want to bring everyone back to the points that Lao Tzu is trying to make. He still has a valid point that we can look at attainment versus humility through the Yin and Yang paradigm. So the highly placed, absolute power possessing monarch must be the lowest in terms of having the most humility. So that's yin and yang right there. This is a valid point because in every discipline that we can observe, we can see how the real masters are the ones who appear to be unassuming. On the other hand, the ones who put on airs, that is, the ones who are constantly reminding you of their titles, positions, achievements, those are not the real masters. So this applies to many different disciplines, many different fields of human endeavor. It applies to Tao cultivation. The real masters of Tao cultivation are unassuming. Those who have high level of spiritual attainment, usually down to earth and easygoing. The ones in Tao cultivation who flaunt their titles or possessions or attainments, they are not the real masters. So why is it that the true masters are naturally humble? It is because when they get higher and more refined in the spiritual attainment, they expand their perception in the Tao. The more they expand, the more they can see their own true insignificance, the true insignificance of themselves and their attainments. So the more they see that, the more naturally humble they become. So look for that when you deal with other people. Look for that when you are interacting with others who are also studying the Tao, cultivating the Tao. See if they are one or the other. Do they possess this kind of arrogance, or do they possess humility? So the yin and yang perception can be very useful. And to continue on with this theme of yin and yang, I want to get to line 11, appear to take loss, the benefit. This is what happens when something looks like a setback, but is actually beneficial. Because the yin and yang interplay applies equally to all other aspects of life. What seems like a loss may actually be a benefit. And to make that more concrete, I want to use some examples. In Asian cultures in general, it is very common to associate putting on weight with good fortune. So a greeting that you may encounter traveling across Asia may be someone who sees you, who's met you before, who will say that, hey, you've put on some weight. Well, they actually mean that as a good thing. You know, what they're saying is that life must be treating you pretty well. That's how you are able to put on additional weight. There can be a cultural clash that when someone in the West is thinking, you know, well, wait a minute, no, wait, I'm keeping slim. I am keeping my figure. I did not put on weight. No, I did not. So then you can have a clash of East and West when one side is actually well-meaning, thinking about trying to use weight gain as a positive compliment, whereas the person from the West is thinking of that as actually a negative remark. But even in the Asian perspective, losing weight doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Losing weight for some can be a benefit to health and fitness. More agile, lighter. This is easy for us to see in the West because we associate, you know, a lot of excess weight with unhealthy lifestyle. But it's a little bit different traditionally in Asia. So another example, though, that we can probably agree on more is that losing clutter, a lot of stuff that you don't use, could be seen as a loss because some of the clutter you want to get rid of may be brand new, never opened, completely unused, and yet losing the clutter because you don't need it, it may be a great benefit to free up more space. Yet another example, loss of employment may turn into a great opportunity to explore different career paths. And this is where we get the expression, some people will sometimes say, you know, quote unquote, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's because they were able to turn that into a great opportunity to walk down a different path and ended up in a different place, a better place. And probably the ultimate example that I talked about before was Steve Jobs, actually. He was ousted from Apple Computer back in 1985. This was the company that he founded. He was ousted from his own company. So he was depressed, shocked and depressed for a time. But he went on to quickly start another company called Next. Also, the year after that, in 1986, he funded a company that would eventually become Pixar. Now, 12 years after he was ousted from Apple, he returned to Apple in 1997. This was because while he was at his new company, Next, he developed an operating system called Next Step. Apple wanted that technology and bought his company for $427 million. And he came as part of the package. And his operating system became the foundation of the Macintosh operating system that we're still using today. Furthermore, at Apple Computer, it's a matter of history that he went on to spearhead the iPod, changing the music industry. He spearheaded the development of the iPhone, changing cell phones forever. And then later on, the iPad, changing tablets forever. So transformative and definitely turning a quote unquote getting fired into the greatest opportunity that he was able to utilize to the max. Therefore, from that example, we can see external appearance, yang, may be the opposite of internal reality. At the time, people might say, Steve Jobs, you got fired. Well, it was actually opening up a door for him to reach much, much greater achievements. Now let's continue with this idea. Something that looks like loss may actually be a benefit. The opposite is also true. Something that you receive as a benefit may actually be a loss. What appears to be a benefit can be a loss. When this comes up for the Chinese people, they always use the classic Chinese story about how the situation can transform itself from positive to negative and back again. That story is called 塞翁失马. And we'll get into that in just a moment. Some of you have already seen it. Some of you have already read it. And if you have, if you can drop me a note in the Q&A section, that will be awesome. It is chapter 8 in the book, The Tao of Daily Life. And the story is called Misfortunes and Blessings. So for those of you who have not read this particular chapter from the book, I would like to briefly go over that story with you for the benefit of those who haven't encountered it. I really enjoyed working on the story because, you know, I have seen so many different depictions of it, so many different versions of it. So I knew that there were many distorted versions floating around. I felt that I could do something good by bringing an accurate version and have that be part of the book. So the full expression, 塞翁失马,焉知非福, the characters that you see on top, I will explain. one by one. But first, I would like to relate the story for you as part of our discussion for this chapter. Once upon a time, in ancient China, specifically in the northern frontier of ancient China, there was a man who was known as a skillful person in raising horses. So this is the Sai Wong, which literally is the old frontiersman. So he lived in the frontiers. His life revolved around raising, training horses. And one day, he experienced what people thought was a misfortune. For some reason, he never quite figured out what it was. His horse got loose and ran off beyond the border, the northern border of ancient China. So beyond the border was the Hu tribe, which in ancient times were known as barbarians. They thought of them as barbarians because the Hu tribe was hostile toward the ancient Chinese. And because the horse ran off in that direction, there was no way for them to go into the Hu territory to retrieve the horse. So that's it. The horse is as good as gone. Now, for the people along the frontier, horses were extremely valuable. So this was a great loss, a great financial setback. So they all commiserated with him. They went to him, they visited with Sai Wong, and they expressed their sympathies. Oh, I am so sorry that this happened to you. This must be a huge loss. What are you going to do? Now, it was surprising to them because Sai Wong has an elderly father, and this is a household of 3 generations. So this was the grandfather, and Sai Wong also has a son. 3 generations, and the grandfather says to them, well, who says this cannot be some kind of blessing? Now, everybody thought that this was crazy. What? You just lost a horse. How can you think of it as a blessing? But the grandfather was right, because months later, the horse came back, bringing another horse, a fine steed from the Hu breed. So the wealth of Sai Wong suddenly doubled. He had his horse back, and he also had an extra horse. So everyone came by. They all thought that this was just extreme good fortune. So they all came to congratulate him. They all came to say, wow, this is amazing. Look at this horse. This is such great luck. But again, the grandfather, his elderly father, surprised everyone and said, who says this cannot be some kind of misfortune? And again, everybody thought the old man was crazy. You know, how can it be? You just got a whole new horse. Now his son, Sai Wong's son, enjoyed riding and decided to take the new horse of the Hu breed out for a ride to break it in. Unfortunately, an accident occurred. The horse threw him off and he fell badly. He broke his leg. And upon hearing this news, neighbors once again gathered, again expressing their sympathies. Oh, this is so horrible. This is terrible. Are you okay? How are you going to be healing up? Now, once again, as you can guess, the grandfather surprised all of them. Just like before, he said, well, who says this cannot be some kind of good fortune? And again, everybody thought that he was crazy. You know, look at your grandson. His leg is broken. There's no way that this can be good fortune. No way at all. But once again, the grandfather was right, because a year later, the Hu tribe decided to invade China. So all the young men were conscripted into the army to defend against the invaders. So fierce battles ensued, and the Hu tribe were seasoned and great warriors, so it resulted in heavy casualties. Out of all the people who had gone into the army to fight the invaders, 9 out of 10 of them died. But the grandson did not go into battle because of his broken leg. And because of this, he was spared that fate of death, 9 out of 10. His family survived the war intact. So this story can potentially go on. But in the original Chinese formulation, it stops there. It's basically saying blessings can be misfortunes, misfortunes can be blessings. They change from one to the other. And it is the mysterious working of destiny that we cannot always understand. So that is the story of 塞翁失马，焉知非福. So let me just take everyone through the different events and how they correspond with the lines that we're studying now in the Daodejing. So the event, horse got loose, ran off into the barbarian territory. Oh my goodness, that is misfortune, right? Well, it appeared to be loss, but may actually be a benefit. The last character there is benefit, the first character is loss. So what's the next event? Well, months later, the horse returned with another horse of the Hu breed. So that's adding to the assets, adding to the wealth of Sai Wong. So that's a good thing, right? That's a blessing. Well, the first character here is benefit, and then the last character here is loss. It appeared to be a gain. Then the next event, son broke his leg, taking the new horse out for a ride. What a horrible event. Well, is it a blessing? It appeared to be a loss. So again, the first character here is loss, and the last character here is benefit. And then the last event, son avoided being drafted to fight the invading Hu tribe. And again, appeared to be a gain. As I mentioned, the story did not have to end at the fourth event. It could have been formulated so that everyone thought that they would be fighting a losing battle against the Hu barbarians, and therefore being drafted into the army was great misfortune. But then event number 5 is that they won an unexpected victory. Most of the able-bodied young men survived, and were healthy, uninjured, and they will be honored, by the emperor, and that turns into a benefit again. So it's possible to formulate this repeatedly, back and forth, but I think by the fourth event, the ancient Chinese storyteller had made the point that you're gonna have switching back and forth in your life. So you want to anticipate, and you want to also exercise your ability to manage the yin and yang in a skillful way. And this is especially applicable when you encounter a situation that seems completely, totally against you. When you feel frustrated, when you feel discouraged, this phrase, 塞翁失马，焉知非福, can be something that reminds you. So I want to explain what the characters mean. So I have the pronunciation here, 塞翁失马, and now I want to explain what the characters mean one by one. The first character means frontier, boundary, border. The second character is old man. Third character loose, last character horse. So the last two characters in particular can only be translated like this, loose horse, and the other two characters have a wider range of possible choices that you can pick from. If you were to transcribe from the literal rendition here, frontier, old man, loose horse. Okay, well, you get close to the original meaning, but to translate, you probably want to shift it around a little bit. The old frontiersman loses a horse. Now it sounds like a complete sentence in English. So that's 塞翁失马. And 塞翁失马, the first half of this expression is meant to depict a substantial loss. And that's because horses were particularly valuable in the frontiers region. Represents wealth. Then let's take a look at the second half. 焉知非福. So here's the pronunciation. It's more like an E sound here instead of yan. It's yan, 焉知非福. Now let's break down the characters one by one. You can see exactly how to translate. First character means how. Second character means no. Third character is not. The last character can be blessing, prosperity, good fortune. Altogether, so if you were to string the literal transcription together, how no, not blessing? Well, we can do a better job by translating into, well, how do you know it's not a blessing? Now you have the complete expression. 塞翁失马，焉知非福. The old frontiersman loses a horse. How do you know it's not a blessing? So bottom line is that life is constantly transitioning from one state to another. Good to bad, bad to good. Not only that, but when we talk about the yin and yang, you should now see that the reality of a situation may not match its outward appearance. All the neighbors were focusing on how it looks externally to judge whether it was misfortune or blessing. The outward appearance is the yang manifestation, the external. The reality of the situation is the inner essence, that's the yin. So yin, sometimes depicted as dark or evil, it's actually something that can be positive. It can be the truth, the internal truth. So with that, we are now ready to actually jump to the conclusion. As usual, time flies when we're having fun. So although there's still quite a bit of chapter 42 to talk about, we are now approaching the end of our time together today. So the summary slide, because it has been 2 weeks since we spoke previously, I would like to remind everyone again of the summary from before. This summary, if you recall, was about balancing yin and yang, that yin and yang can manifest in different ways in your life, and everybody has them. So if you take a look through the list, you want to integrate the two, have the proper balance between them to have harmony in your life. It starts with a balance between rest and work. Then you look at work in a different way. Work involves planning and the carrying out of the plan, putting the plan to work. And that's yin and yang as well. As you interact with other people, you can potentially be listening to others, or you can be expressing yourself to them. To listen, to be receptive, is the yin principle. To express yourself is the yang principle. quietness, silence, always yin. Noise, activities, socializing, chatting, talking, yang, social time with friends. Studying the Tao, mental concentration, yin, that's an internal process. Explain the Tao to other people, yang, that's the external process. And here, what it's saying is that you want to balance the two. You don't want to just study the Tao. You also want to find some opportunities to explain the Tao to other people. In a similar way, you don't just want to spend quiet time by yourself in solitude. Remember to allocate some time to socialize with friends. We are all social creatures. And then lastly, there's the observation versus action. Observation is yin, taking action is yang. So this is just a reminder from the summary last time. Here is a reminder that reflects on what we talked about today. What we talked about today, two things. Number one, yin and yang is embedded as sort of a universal DNA or natural blueprint in all living things. That includes you. That includes you and me and everybody we know. So hence the expression, you are a child of the universe. That means yin and yang energies are within you. They are also in everything that you do. Your obligation is to integrate the yin and yang to increase harmony in your life. When they are in the proper balance, you have everything being harmonious. You want to be able to integrate the two to manage gain and loss skillfully. For that, I would simply remind you of the story that we talked about today. Losing a horse, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? You want to be able to manage gain and loss skillfully. And then recognizing misfortunes and blessings for what they truly are. This is a little bit different because in blessings, you want to take care not to be overjoyed. In misfortunes, you want to recognize that there's going to come another opportunity, there's going to be a comeback, so you don't want to be crushed. Lastly, and point number 3, you can turn whatever life throws at you into something great. So think about the example that I mentioned, quote unquote, getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. That's just one way, that's just one example to see how something that appears to be bad can in fact be very good. And how do you turn whatever life throws at you into something great? Well, first, understand the reason behind this particular life event and how it can serve you. And let me remind everyone, when you are 80 years old or older, and you are about to, you know that your days are numbered, and you look back upon your life. This will be a life event that you can review, whatever setback you may be encountering right now. And at that time, you want to be able to say, I learned a valuable lesson. You can always learn more from defeat than victory. And you know how to plan your comeback. And again, planning is yin, and put your plan into action. And once again, putting a plan into motion, putting it into action is very yang. You gotta have both. Both yin and yang together will give you the power that you need. And lastly, 塞翁失马，焉知非福. Just a reminder for everyone about the story that we went through today. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.